Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. It's great to have you here. I can see people already joining in and saying hi and hello in the comments. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Just let me know in the comments. Tell me your name and where you're joining us from so I can know that you can hear me. We are so excited. Awesome. Daniel said they can hear me. Awesome. We're so excited to have all of you here. And we have some amazing guests that will be joining me here soon. They're backstage. Welcome to our pilot episode. Founders, investors, startup operators everywhere, we're so excited to have you join this pilot episode of our Doing Business in Africa series, where we will curate the most valuable conversation about brilliant operators and their experiences building businesses in Africa. At the end of each episode, you'll have learned something new about the African business landscape from founders, investors, policymakers, and operators building businesses on the continent. So we are really excited. This series is brought to you by Itana, Africa's first free zone for the digital economy. And you can just go to itana.africa to learn more. So welcome. Let's see the intros that are coming in. Let's know where you're joining us from. So we have Ebony from NYC, Daniel from Adu Obi. We have Rebecca from Gabon. Wow. We have Michael from London, Jacob from Lagos. Awesome. It's so lovely to have you all here joining this series. So we are making history together because this is our pilot episode. And so we want you to be able to share comments, give feedback as we go along, and we're so excited. So, as I mentioned, I have three amazing guests with me here today. I'm going to do a quick introduction and then I'll bring them on stage, even though I know that they need no introduction. So, first off, we have Luqman, who is building a new jurisdiction to allow businesses to access the African market remotely from anywhere in the world. He's also known as the CEO of Itana. You must have seen him around. And then we have Yvonne, who's a partner at Local Globe, EMEA's leading VC firm with over $1.5 billion under management. It's one thing to have millions of dollars. When you enter that billions of dollars, you know that you mean real business. And finally, we have Iyin Aboyeji, also known as E, who has co-founded two unicorns on the African continent and is now investing in the future of Africa through his VC firm, Future Africa. And I am Nkechi, and I will be your lovely host today. Hello, everyone. Hi, Yvonne. Hi, Lukman. Hi, E. Say hi to all our lovely
Hello,
guests.
how are you
Hi.
doing?
I'm good. It's great to see all of you here, even though we were just chatting a few minutes ago, but it's great to have all of you here. And we have such amazing people that are joining in. And also, some people are streaming straight from LinkedIn, YouTube. Feel free to also leave comments there as we go along. I'm about to put E on the spot real quick. So
Okay.
today is E's birthday, and I wanted us to just do a quick shout out, say happy birthday to him, put it in the comments, send him your well wishes. Today's his birthday, and we dragged
Um,
him out on his birthday for us.
it's another day to make impact. Just another day. So thank
Just
you.
another day to make impact. Well, we're grateful that you're here. You know,
Yeah.
it's a
And
great.
apologies
Your
to the
life has
wife.
been really impactful. Apologies to the wife and
Apologies to
family.
your friends. But I know that apology is not for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We have some questions here, and for people that RSVP, there's some questions they sent in, which we would come to. But we'll start with a few of the questions here. And please feel free to drop your questions in the comments. We'll be able to come and take those questions. This webinar is designed to be more Q&A style, so it's very relaxed. We want it to be valuable to you. So the more questions you ask, the more value you can derive from it. So just feel very comfortable putting your questions, and we're happy to take the questions. So we're going to kick it off with the first question for Lukman. Lookman, why Itana? And I know this question comes a lot because,
Yeah.
building something very novel, you're basically creating a new business jurisdiction in Africa. I mean, why are you doing this? What struggles have you seen with market entry or expansion that has made this a big enough problem to build a startup around?
Yeah, you're right. I've heard this question so many times, and I've started thinking of new ways of rephrasing the same thing I say over and over again, so I don't sound like what's it called, something on repeat. So I think that why Itana, right? That was the question. I think the first question is why Africa, right? But I won't talk too much about that because I'm sure if you've gone to any seminars or conferences, everyone says the basic things over and over again, right? Why Africa is a new market to be in, right? But then high level stuff, rate of return for FDI is potentially higher in Africa than any other jurisdiction, and obviously our youth population. I think about by 2050, half of our population are under 40. We're talking about 4.39 billion by 2000. 80% of them have access to the mobile phones. So we're seeing the attractiveness of the whole African market as a whole, right? And obviously that comes with its risks and challenges, right? And I think that is where we're holistically looking at and seeing how could a startup company holistically solve for that, right? So challenges when it comes to the inadequacy of policy, the volatility of policy. We've seen a bit of that with the whole crypto story happening now in Nigeria. And then also the lack of infrastructure, right? ADB talking about Africa needing somewhere between 130 to 170 billion dollars every year, right, to be able to close down that infrastructure gap, and obviously access to talent, access to talent and finance are all challenges when trying to come into the African market. But I think that the first challenge is even really lack of information, right? Information is key, right? Understanding of how to come into the African market. So why Itana? I think that before Itana came, right, half the solution was already being developed, right? And I'm talking about the Africa Trade Union Agreement, right? That is essentially creating the ability for free flow of trade and services across Africa, right? And this is now talking about and this Africa Trade Union Agreement is essentially going to be the biggest free zone in the world, right? We're talking about 1.2 billion people, a GDP of 2.5 trillion, right? Creating this free zone, right? And obviously we know what free zones are, right? Jurisdictions ideal for to catalyze FDI and business in the region, right? Ideal taxation, ideal banking, ideal immigration to sort of catalyze investment, and obviously making it easier for ease of business for foreigners to come into the new markets. So that's half the solution, right? The Africa Trade Union stuff. And then we believe we're the second half of the solution, right? Itana, right? Where what we're trying to do is that essentially we're enabling Nigeria being the biggest economy in Africa, right? It makes sense we start with Nigeria, right? And then setting up, and then what we're doing is that we're enabling foreigners or foreign companies to set up a global business from Nigeria, right? How do you set up a global company from Nigeria? And that was the problem. That was the first problem that obviously Ian, Yvonne, and I sat down and decided we were going to come together to solve, right? So Itana essentially is the ideal jurisdiction, right? We're trying to design the ideal jurisdiction, focusing on the digital and financial space, right? And service-oriented businesses, trying to create the ideal jurisdiction for them to set up and either penetrate the African market or scale across the African market, right? And what it is this a one-stop shop, getting access to better business incentives, whether it's taxation, immigration, banking, right? And being able to remotely incorporate from anywhere in the world, right? Which and having this one-stop shop to make it easy for you to come into the African market and set up your business or run your global business from Nigeria, right? Which gives you access to the talent, access to the market and such. And obviously that plus realizing that businesses and operations start here in Africa, right? The challenge of Africa infrastructure still exists, right? So we're complementing this with this physical district to concentrate infrastructure, right? So that global companies from Nigeria or Africa can compete globally, right? So it's not just about setting up a business for Africa, right? It's about growing businesses from Africa, which E has experience from, right? To be able to compete with global firms across the world, right? Am I taking all your time, or I'll just
It's not surprising because it's a novel, it's a new concept. So
yeah,
yes, there's a lot of explaining and being able to get people to understand what it means. But I think that was really, really very enlightening. I think if anyone has questions about it, you can still put it in the comments, and Luqman is able to touch more on it, even more especially about the local businesses that are looking to actually scale from Nigeria, which is a great opportunity there as well. I will move to Yvonne. So, Yvonne, Local Globe has invested in almost 400 companies around the world and made several exits. And there's some common trends with market expansion strategies that work, especially for companies looking to become Pan African. So there's some companies that want to be able to go from one African jurisdiction to another. And then you would think that this would be really easy, and yet some companies have found it easier to scale to Europe than to other African markets, which is really weird. So, what are some strategies that you've seen that has worked in helping companies become Pan African, play in the African market?
Yeah, I think that, when it comes to expansion, it comes with its challenges, whether a company is expanding within Europe, within the US, there's always complexities and challenges that one will face. When I think about expansion in Africa in particular, I think some of the challenges that do come to mind are around, the regulatory compliance issues, and that's why I'm really excited about Itana, right? Because we're really solving for that with Itana, and Luqman will share more on that. But I think more importantly, when I think about strategies that I've seen work, particularly within the African context, two things that come to mind. So we're investors in Move, for example, and he's obviously a founding investor in Move, and Move, as you know, just raised a significant Series B round. And it's a company that was built in Nigeria and has now gone global. So when I think about companies that have expanded, that's one that comes to mind that's done it really well. And the way in which they did that was through the partnership that they had with Uber. That's enabled them to scale with Uber. So I think when companies are thinking about expansion, particularly companies that have a B2B approach or are working with partners, they should think about, okay, who are we going to set out to partner with? And when expanding, can you expand with their partners' customers in other markets as well? And that's a great way to just ease the pressure a bit, because you know that whatever market you move to, you are going to have someone that can help and grow alongside, right? The other thing I've seen quite well is work, particularly with fintech companies, is acquisition, thinking about acquisition. And I think that's something we don't think enough about, right? So if you're thinking about expanding to another market, is there a business within that market that has been there before, has the same customer base? I think that's something that is really worth considering, because at the end of the day, if you are thinking about expanding in another market, without you having that local market expertise, because every country in Africa is so different, comes with its own complexities and regulatory challenges, it helps to have that local know-how. And sometimes that can be acquired as opposed to going there and building it yourself. You can save a lot of time in doing that. So partnerships, again, I don't think we think enough about that. And also acquisition as another tool. And speak to the Tana team.
Yeah. Thanks.
Those are amazing. Those are amazing partnerships, acquisition, and speak to the Itana team. I think those that's an amazing strategy when looking to do that. Um, when it comes to partnerships, I feel that some people don't understand how valuable it is to partner, especially like you mentioned the Move and the Uber one. Like these are companies that you wouldn't think they would be able to do that just because of in the space, when you look at the space in which they play. But being able to see the opportunity, even with it with your competitors, and seeing how you can work together, because in the end the market is really large, as Lucan has mentioned. I think it opens up opportunities to be able to expand. So E, we're here with you now. So you're an experienced operator in the African tech, and you've had years of experience doing this, and you've worked with partners across the world. What are some cultural factors that international businesses need to consider when Africa has it's very culturally diverse? I mean, just Nigeria alone, we have like over 300 plus tribes, and even within that, over 1,000 different cultures. So it may seem scary for someone who doesn't understand the market when they look at coming in? What are things that they need to consider when you look at the diversity, when you look at the culture and the people? What are things that they have to consider?
Yeah, this is a very great question. My view of many African markets is diverse as they be. They People often fall into certain patterns, clear patterns in terms of their customer profile, and the opportunity really is engaging with curiosity and partnering with great talent on the ground that understands a particular demographic. And you know, they're typically two unhelpful ends of the spectrum when you tell people, when you ask people this question. So there's one where the mentality is like Africa is a country, so whatever applies wherever I am in Africa applies all over Africa. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where it's like Africa is not a country, it's 54 different countries,
Yeah.
what works in one place won't work in the other. And the truth is really that the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Because the reality is that Africa does have certain commonalities. Um, Sometimes they are geographic or regional, like you have ECOWAS, you have some of these regional groupings, SADC, EAC, and so on and so forth. But I think post COVID, a lot of those commonalities have shifted from just purely geographic to now what I would say demographic, right? So I would argue that a customer in VI or Ikoyi probably has more in common with a customer in Santon or Cape Town. You understand what I'm saying? Than
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do with even somebody who's, just 2 blocks down from them, in Yaba, right? Um, and it's just important for you to be able to map those demographic patterns and then find talented people who understand those demographics, whether they're your staff or their channels that regularly deal with those demographics. And then you can now leverage scale to be able to pull the pieces together. And the beauty of Itana is that on a legal and regulatory point of view, you want to make things as simple as possible so you can focus all your energy on identifying demographic patterns. And the beauty of the digital free zone is, if you're looking at building a business, I know earlier somebody was talking about how people are expanding, like Move was expanding from Africa to other countries. Well, they were serving the same general customer, which is migrants, people migrating either from cities to towns or from other countries in the developing world to countries in the developed world, and we're looking for new opportunities, of which the first they could access was mobility assets. But they didn't have the financing to unlock it. So if you take that and you say, okay, you know what? I want to build a global business, and that's how I think most entrepreneurs should be thinking about it. However, am I ready to go and start paying taxes in the US or paying taxes in London? That will eat into my income, right? And I don't need to be paying taxes there because most of the IP and most of my talent is in Nigeria, where the talent is cheaper. So let me set up in the zone so I can continue to leverage Nigerian talent, but let me build a global business which I can build tax free because the Nigerian government, is willing to, if you're exporting services or exporting products, have you be in the free zone where you can earn income from all over the world. So it's really about simplifying the legalese and amplifying your pattern matching skills so that you're able to adapt to the right demographic, but leveraging the same core legal and financial infrastructure.
I think that's very insightful in being able to see it that way because then you can see the patterns. You can see where your market is. And I know that we say that Africa is not a country, but maybe looking at it without the borders might then be helpful in looking at, okay, it's not Nigeria behaves this way or Ghana behaves this way, but people that are like this behave this way and they are here in Lagos, they are here in Kenya, they are here in this. I think that is just that's quite a different way to see it, and that's really amazing. Um, let's see some of the questions that we have coming in. And please feel free to put your questions in the comments. I'm going to be taking it. I can see a question here from Daniel. I'll put it up and then I'll take it out. He says, how do you turn around a tech company that has been struggling to meet its revenue target for many years? Also, how do you plan to scale that company as well in not just in one country, but across Africa? It's a very interesting question. I mean, lots of people have companies that are struggling to make revenue. Imagine the investor meetings are quite tense. So,
Mhm.
who would like to take that one? I feel like I want to give it to E. I feel like this is a question that
Oh wow, wow, wow. So I think there are many nuances to that question, and I don't know your particular circumstance. So I'm not going to give a broad recommendation. But I want you to think about three things as you decide where your company needs to go next. The first thing is removing the geographic lens, i.e., the I'm a Nigerian tech startup that serves Nigerians. Who is your customer? And are there people like your customer all over the world? Right? Because all of a sudden you increase your TAM from, I know everybody believes their market is 200 million people in Nigeria, but maybe if you're being very honest, it's maybe 300,000 people in Ikoyi, right? And then you can say, okay, who else is like this 300,000 people in Ikoyi? And where are they all over the world? Especially if it's a digital service, because there is no barrier to a digital service except the internet, which is
yeah.
everywhere. And then the second question is, how can I manage and how can I leverage that new focus to increase dollar revenue? Because the truth is, more revenue always solves your problems. Whatever issue you're facing, if you make more money, the problem will go away. I can guarantee you that. Right? It does come with new problems, but that's a much better situation to be in than to have problems, because you will have problems in this world. You will have problems. That's what Jesus said. But if you have money, you can solve your problems. If you are poor, you cannot solve your problems. That's just how the world works. So you have to ask yourself, okay, how can I make more money? How can I make more dollars? How can I make more, charge higher tier of customers? Then, after you have now figured out how you're going to make money, you now ask yourself, how can I reduce my cost? Right? You're probably paying a lot of taxes in Nigeria. Right? Which is not a bad thing. But if you're serving customers outside of the country, maybe you want to move to an Itana free zone so that you can at least be able to manage your growth better and pay a more streamlined number of taxes, right? Maybe you're hiring a lot of people outside the country, and maybe you're able to better identify people within the country who perhaps want to just earn in foreign currency. Well, you can't do that in the customs area, but you can do that from the digital free zone with Itana. So you got to think about your business from the point of view of, okay, how can I streamline my administration and my costs? And finally, I would say focus solves 95% of every startup's problem. The moment you laser your focus on one product that's working, one thing that's working well, immediately you find that a lot of your team you don't need. So you can have them, you can reassign them, or you can part ways with them. You will find that a lot of your costs are unnecessary. They don't chase any revenue, so you don't need to deal with them. So if you really streamline your focus to what is profitable about your business, you will find that you might end up with a much more profitable business that does one thing but does it extremely well and at enough scale to keep your business running.
Amazing. I think even the part on focus. I know that I was in a pitch competition once, and the founder was talking about his startup, and they were doing like all these many things, and it just became confusing. I think people, you see the opportunities and you try to chase a lot of them, and that can end up stretching you, making you spend more, you're getting less revenue. But that was a wonderful response, Daniel. I hope you were able to note some insights from that. We have some questions that came in when people RSVP, so I'm going to take a few of them. And please keep putting your questions in the comments. We're happy to take the questions. This question came from Ryan Lee, said, what are the key trends you are seeing with foreign corporates and ecosystem builders entering the Nigerian market right now? So what are the key trends that you're seeing with foreign corporates and ecosystem builders entering the Nigerian market right now? Um,
I can take that one too if you want, and then maybe
yeah,
you can back me up. Huh? Because we talk to a lot of them every week.
yeah,
I think the biggest thing we're seeing with foreign corporates is foreign corporates are looking at Nigeria as a source of talent, and not just as a market. So, meanwhile, prior to now, they were just happy to be in Nigeria because it's a big market and so on. But of course, with the economic right sizing that's going on right now, um, what a lot of companies are thinking about is, well, here's an opportunity for me to get incredible Nigerian talent at somewhat more affordable prices, right? And then leverage that talent base to be able to serve the wider region. And my hope is the entire continent as AFCFTA becomes a reality. So you're seeing a lot of corporates. People think a lot of corporates are running away. Actually, they're coming in
wow,
droves, looking to us. And I think the other thing that they're asking themselves is, well, it's my biggest market. My talent has to be here to be able to focus on the market, but I can also leverage this talent elsewhere. Now, for a lot of those companies, they are coming to Itana and they're saying to us, you know what, if you can allow us to do both from here, serve our markets in Nigeria, right? And do the appropriate things. And then from here, also build a global base. That would be excellent. We don't want to do that, from afar anymore. And I think the second thing that we're hearing from corporate and emerging ecosystem builders is, we've been on this Delaware. Well, from emerging ecosystem builders like myself, we've been on this Delaware matter for a long time.
yeah,
But Delaware has a lot of hidden costs. It's not just the $150 they charge you to incorporate. 1 year later, they come back with franchise tax, which, if you don't know what you're doing, can be as high as $40,000. If you don't know what you're doing, you also may now also incur some other liabilities somewhere else. And the expertise that is required for you to be able to turn that situation around may cost you a couple $1,000s. So before you know it, you've spent $10,000 to $15,000, which in naira is money.
lot.
It can pay rent. So people are now saying, you know what? I'd rather deal with my local, you know, FZE thing. I don't want to deal with the complexity of being in the market and any foreign currency because it can be restrictive. But maybe I want to be in the free zone where it's possible for me to sort of run on a low tax basis, especially since I don't have any real income anyway, right? I pay something more reasonable and my costs are fixed because all the service talent and everything around, are locally priced to some general extent. So I think we're seeing quite a bit of that as well. But I think we're seeing a lot of interest. We have about how many companies do we have now that are in Itana 100?
So we have a wait list. I think Nkechi, you have more up to date. But I know our wait list is up to like the 200 or 250 currently now in our wait list, trying to get into the free zone.
Yeah,
Right, and we know. I think that we are day by day. We are getting more companies like Itana 100 who are now in the process of getting their licenses. Right, so I think that we will get our top 100 or first 100 in the next couple of weeks. We would close the first 100 companies in the zone, right? And then obviously we'll use this because it's a novel idea. We would use this group of people to obviously test out these services, make sure everything's working right before we open up to everybody else.
I
yeah,
mean, it sounds novel. One thing I do want to say is it sounds novel, but it's not really that novel because the truth is, some of the biggest industrialists, they know these secrets and they use it to their advantage, right? There's a reason why Dangote has an entire fleet of
yeah,
business. So if you want to enjoy the benefits that Dangote is enjoying, you know,
It's novel. It's novel one way. It's novel. It's novel. Because the problem is that Dangote, you can go and see Dangote and see his office and see
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
But you can come to Itana. You can come on a tour to Itana. You have an office in Itana. That's what I'm telling you. I'm saying it's not that novel. It sounds novel, but it's
businesses
something that the very rich in Nigeria have been doing for decades. Every rich person knows how to get their way around. The normal things are us mekunu. Us poor people, we don't really understand. But the rich have been doing this for decades. I don't think Dangote goes to his refinery every day. you know, sitting in VI on his private jets, but his investments are, earning,
again.
exactly. They're optimized. So I think we're saying novel like as if nobody's trying. It's novel for us poor people, which is why we have to do it fast before it stops being novel. But for the rich, this is nothing new. This is how they work.
So I think when I say novel, I think I was talking about the other side of the coin. So from the government and the regulation side of stuff,
it's novel. It's novel to them. Yes.
So
Yeah.
so that's where I was more focused on.
Okay. This question, I think I'm going to give it to Yvonne. Is from Abdul, and it said, "What are some of the current trends and emerging opportunities in specific sectors within Africa, and how can businesses capitalize on these trends to drive growth and innovation?" So, there's some trends that you've seen across the continent that you think some like businesses can capitalize on.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting opportunities within the food space. I think that if you think about the average spend by the typical African, like food is a large proportion of that wallet. And so catering for solutions within that space, I think make a lot of sense. One area that we've been focusing on over the last year is around B2B payments as well. I mean, if you look at the continent as a whole, 44 million small to medium sized businesses, and they haven't been served from a B2B payments perspective, right? And so the vast majority of them still rely on paper-based processes, managing payroll, expenses, accounts payable. And one of the key issues with this, it's very burdensome, error prone, a lot of mismatch discrepancies and so on. And I feel as if there's a lot of work to be done from that perspective as well. The World Bank actually came out in the report and said this is a potential $1.5 trillion opportunity, which is huge problem. It's a huge problem, but it's a huge opportunity. So that's one area that we're particularly interested in. And I think, there's just there's still so many infrastructure challenges, and there's companies that are innovating these in really clever ways. So, for example, there's a construction tech company that we invested in, which is really solving for the way in which construction materials are procured. So I think that, if you are an entrepreneur thinking of ways in which you can build a really large scale business in Africa, just seek out real problems, because there are no shortage of problems that need to be solved. Spend time deep with the customers, understand what the issues are and how you can build a solution to solve these real problems. And just spending your time deep within the issue will enable you to figure out, okay, how do I go about solving this? I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah, I completely agree. Africa does have a lot of painful problems, but yeah, there are opportunities in it. The opportunities in it to be able to build a great solution. Um, and I think some of the mistakes people make is they try to copy what has worked in developed world and just copy and paste it, and then you see that it doesn't really fit in.
Yeah.
um, we have to look at what would work for our own environment, because I've seen that it can be a little bit different. Some of the copy and paste have not gone really, really well. But I think that also brings us to this question by Muhammad here. And he said, what are your thoughts on the in Africa for Africa concept? I think maybe companies in Africa building for Africa. I think that's what he means. Do you believe it has the potential to foster the development of large-scale African businesses comparable to Amazon within the next decade?
I think I can start
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
that a bit. And then I'm sure you would have a lot more to add. So I think that with globalization and with the fast penetration of the internet in Africa, right? These barriers and some of the handicaps that we have seen in traditional manufacturing or traditional businesses, right, are starting to not be as important as before, right? Now we're seeing, obviously, with access to the internet, it's easier to penetrate new markets, right? Easier for African countries, African businesses to sell to other to markets around the world, right? So this Africa to Africa thing, right? So the full question was, let me see. Can you put the question up again and see what else am I
Yeah.
missing? Yeah. Um, so yes, with the, so I think the internet has solved for that issue a lot, right? Where traditional infrastructure, which is power, internet, which are still problems, are still handicaps in Nigeria, right? And Africa, which does create that handicap when trying to create a global business from Nigeria, isn't as important, right? When we look at digital and financial business, as opposed to the former sectors like manufacturing and such, right, where power was key, right, at that large scale. So yes, I do believe the Africa to Africa concept, and I think that E is a testament to that, right? Building unicorns that have been able to cross that border, right? And but the challenges that people like Itana are trying to face, right, are the other bottlenecks when it comes to the inadequacy in policy, the volatility in policy, right? The access to community. We do have the talent. We've spoken about this earlier on in this conversation, right? Where in a couple of years from now, right, most of the youth of the world are going to exist in Africa, right? And this is in an aging world, right, where everywhere else, right, people are getting older and older, but the talent is going to become more and more based from Africa, right? So with talent, with internet, and with the penetration of the internet, these are making the gap between Africa and the world much smaller and making it easier for Africa to build businesses globally, right? And then the kind of policies that we're facing or we're tackling in Tana is to make that happen, right? So that in a couple of years from now, we're not just seeing 2 or 3 unicorns, we're able to see 10 or 20 unicorns, right, come from Africa and scale across the world.
Awesome. Awesome. I think people don't fully grasp the market opportunity in Africa. And to be honest, I think it's still unfolding as it is. So even looking at the question that he asked, he said that would do we believe that it has the opportunity, the potential to foster the development of the large-scale African business comparable to Amazon? So I want to ask this question to the people that are listening in. Looking at how large Amazon is, how long do you think it's going to take an African company to reproduce something of that scale? Do you think it's going to take 10 years or 20 years? Please let me know in the comments. I'd like to see how long you think it will take an African company to produce an Amazon scale business. I would love to see the comments. Put it in the comments. If it's 5 years, you think 10 years, 100 years, hopefully not. Let me know in the comments so I can see it. Some other amazing questions here. So
Sorry,
this
can
one
I
is
just
right
add
in.
something to what Lukman? Can I just add something to what Lukman
Sure,
said?
sure.
So when people talk about Africa for Africa, I think, like he said, but just to further emphasize, we need to be thinking bigger than Africa. Africa is a continent of poor young people, right? All of us are working class, right? We don't have
The
wealth. We have,
shade.
well, it's just the truth, right? Except you want to lie to yourself. We are talented young people. We don't have money yet. But if we work hard for the rest of the world, if we export, if we give the world what it wants, just like China did in their years of development, in 30 years from now, all of us will have plenty of money. So the way to think about Africa is Africa for the world, not Africa for Africa. Because if we think about Africa for Africa, it means we're going to be poor, you know? And the problem with this Africa for Africa mantra is that it allows a lot of foreigners to, through us, now extract even more, right? So somebody's saying Africa for Africa, but all the technology and know-how is coming from the US, and we have to pay dollars for it, or it's coming from China and we have to pay yuan for it. It's not helping our economy. Meanwhile, all we are exporting are raw materials in the name of Africa for Africa. So I think what we need to do is we need to now adopt Africa for the world. You understand? Let's build the
Like
structure.
that.
Today, for example, look at our music industry. Most of the IP in our music industry is owned by foreign labels, but they are telling us it's our music and it's going around the world. But it doesn't, we are not the ones benefiting from it. If those music labels were in Itana, for example, then Africans would own the music IP, right? And the money will be coming in as dollars. That's why our currency is weak, right? Because we don't earn enough dollars. So we need to change our mindset. I've incorporated billion-dollar companies out of Delaware, but I want to stop. As soon as I'm one of the first customers of Itana, as soon as
Yeah.
our pilot process is done, I want to move all my businesses from around the world back to Itana. Let's be inside this Nigeria together. You
Yeah.
understand? Then from here, we'll now be investing in other places around the world. And of course, the tax benefits and the simple jurisdiction and the simple ease of use and immigration benefits only makes it a much more attractive proposition. But
I think,
ultimately, we need to change our mindsets that we
yeah,
have to
yeah,
be moving our wealth offshore, is not a good thing.
yeah. Africa for the world. I really feel like that should be on a t-shirt somewhere because that should be the mantra in seeing how we could do that. Because it's not just Africa and Africa. And I know you said that we are poor. Some people said God forbid somewhere when you said
Not
that.
by
But
God forbid, though. We are poor. He's very rich by producing value. So it's not by God forbid. Now I leave that one for church. Inside here.
oh my God. But yeah, Africa is the world. I think that's really amazing. And there's so much opportunities in being doing that. And that attracts more, you know, people can earn in foreign currencies, companies can be able to serve these larger markets that are able to pay even better. People are able to export their skills. So yeah, and then being able to provide the infrastructure that enables this. I know some freelancers that are serving global companies and they have such problem just getting paid, like what you mentioned, Yvonne, like just being able to get their payments in. But yeah, I think that is. We have another question here. So now the questions are moving to the regulatory bit. I know that Luqman will be getting ready for these questions. So this is the first one from Ebony and said, what are some strategies for overcoming regulatory or legal obstacles when forming partnerships across its international borders? How can tech startup ecosystems in both the US and Lagos, Nigeria, leverage each other's strengths to foster mutually beneficial partnerships?
Yeah, that's like the $1 million question that we're
I
trying to.
know, I know.
So, and you said that, but I'll start it. But I thought because I don't know Yvonne, if you're a lawyer. I know he's a lawyer in the room, right?
Oh, I'm a lawyer, but I didn't pass the bar. But I have a
So I will try to answer that now, and it's sort of the things that we have learned in Itana now, right? That regulations isn't built for one company alone, right? It's built for the ecosystem, right? So what we have learned to do to be able to do that is that you have to be able to talk with one voice, right, to government, right, and be and one powerful voice, right, showing the benefits to both sides. That's one of the things that I think that tech companies tend not to do is when you have a problem, you don't look at this from the government aspect. What's the benefit to the government? And you're always looking at it from our perspective. So what we did in Itana was we were able to set up a non-profit initiative where we brought in collectively, right, companies that could provide benefit to the government, right, and us being able to prove to government be able to talk with one voice to the government, right? What with one prayer or with a few prayers, right, of what we would need and how this would impact the government, rather than talking about how this would impact us, by showing the mutual benefit in some of these regulatory and policy advancements that were required. So we set up DivsIn, That is a collaboration with which is Future Africa, AFC, PwC, and such, right? And we brought in the right experts, right, to be able to come up with our memo, right, to government, to present the regulatory advancements we required, but also at the same time taking that time to be able to give evidence or prove to government how this benefits the bigger, solve their problems. Right now, the problem in Nigeria is FX, right? So a lot of our prayers are aligned to show how this supports that, and I think it's a lot to do with that, right? Where it's not talking again. The government will not solve your problem, but if your ecosystem is big enough, they will then look to solve that problem, right? So I think we start with that, right? At you have anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I have a lot to add. I
I
think a
thought
lot of it is around playing to your strengths. So I'll give you a practical example, Ebony, right? So in the US, for example, the US is the world's biggest pool of investment capital. It's never going to change, right? No matter how successful Itana becomes, it cannot be the US in terms of its ability to mobilize capital. And that's not even the goal, right? But imagine a world where Itana, Itana companies have an investment and presence in America. So the money from American investors is coming through a Delaware C Corp. But because of agreements and because of relationships with FZEs like Itana, you know that you're going to incorporate a subsidiary in Itana FZE, which communicates with your US investor base. It also optimizes their investment. It means they don't have to pay 30% tax on profits and all this other stuff. They can have a very streamlined sort of corporate presence in Africa with a private sector. Because one of the things that a lot of businesses tell us is that, look, the government is difficult to work with, which is okay, because the government is not designed for foreign investors. It's designed for local businesses. So if you're trying to export, the government can be difficult to work with because they change the rules to accommodate the businesses that are their primary constituency, right? And Itana now serves as, just like Luqman was saying, an opportunity for you to sort of have special rules made for you if your business is export focused, right? And there's nothing that says an Itana cannot create sort of similar jurisdiction in a place like New York, right? There's nothing that says they cannot create similar jurisdiction. After all, Delaware is sort of in many ways sort of a great example, but there are probably opportunities to carve out some sort of special jurisdiction where, you know, companies that are exporting to Africa beyond capital, of course, maybe exporting other things to Africa we can work together on a cross-jurisdictional basis with special rules. It's a lot easier to work with small zones like us than to work with the big giant federal government of Nigeria, right? And nobody knows how to engage the federal government of Nigeria better than we can. So I really think there's an opportunity to sort of coalesce all our interests using this special zone where special rules can be made, so that you're not dealing with, for example, if you want to make laws in Nigeria, you have to deal with the National Assembly, which is over 600 House of Rep members and another 130 senators, right? Who all of them, you know, 3 from each state. So literally you have to deal with so many people, not to talk of all the ministers, not to talk of the presidents, not so. And as Lukman can tell you, it's not easy. It's not very easy to do. He's been doing it for us. It's an amazing job that he's been doing, but it's not easy. But if we came together under Itana, we can find particular concessions as a group, as opposed to everybody going to talk to Abuja, different people with different agendas. We can actually come together as a group. And then the more that we can demonstrate that this thing that we are saying actually contributes to economic growth as a group, the more likely Abuja is willing to say, oh, actually, I think we can now take this rule and take it to the rest of the country. So I think really building these regulatory sandboxes, it goes beyond dealing with one regulator after the other. It's really about building a physical and digital space where this regulatory sandbox can exist. And it makes it easy for companies to then engage with different regulators. So just think about us as one big lobby group
Yeah.
for businesses that want to do business globally from Nigeria.
I think that's quite interesting, the fact that we are now at this position. I know some not too long ago, the idea of startups engaging with government was something that they didn't want to do. In fact, they said they were going to innovate, like without government. They're going to innovate and solve the problems without the help of government. And then now, the companies in the ecosystem have matured to a point where they can actually engage with government in a way that the government can even see how this benefits them. For me, that's a huge sign of maturity, being able to get to this point. And I feel it's like a very serious point of inflection as regulations begin to change in line with where the ecosystem is going. So I think that's really, really amazing. And all the issues that we're seeing being raised, um, things getting banned overnight and the rest, these are all part of the process. As far, like, that's what I see, they're part of the process. You need to see the growing pains, and things have to break for them to change. So when they break, I just feel that's an opportunity for it to change, and this government engagement allows the conversation to flow. The channel is there for the conversation. So that's really amazing. We get a lot of regulatory questions, so that's not surprising. There's another one here that I feel would be, it just, a piggyback on the other one and should be very quick to answer. And Samson is saying he's just reading about what Itana is doing. I don't know what took you so long, but if you haven't read about it, go to itana.africa and read more about what we're doing. He said he got really excited. Not surprising, it's quite exciting. So his question is: considering the unfriendly regulatory landscape of the crypto and blockchain space in Nigeria, how do the DFZ, the Digital Free Zone, help overcome these hurdles as far as company incorporation is concerned? I think this is quite interesting in the light of all the recent events. Lookman, do you want to
There
take
is,
this? Or
well, there is an ongoing engagement around
Yeah.
this. I mean, there's some preliminaries that have to be done. We actually, it's funny, we were the first zone to have a long time ago to start talking to blockchain companies, you
yeah,
know, about engaging. But you know, there is now a regulatory framework from SEC, which free zone companies are included in, right? So my sense is that there will probably be some collaboration around that.
Yeah.
So if you're a crypto company looking to come to Nigeria, Itana would actually be the best way for you to engage, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of confusion around what you're doing, how you're doing it, and I think that's what the regulatory framework is trying to address. You know, so I don't know, Lukman, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that's a good place to pocket that answer, right? Because you're right that Itana, I said that there are different levels of regulations, right? That we're working on, right? Incorporation, banking, which is going to affect the crypto space, is part of our first tier of regulations that we're starting to solve for. And on top of that, obviously, the conversations on how crypto will work will be something that we will be tackling or will be solving for soon. So right now there is, of course, transition of government and stuff like that. There is more conversations that need to be concluded before we can really speak about how crypto will operate in the future.
awesome. We have just about 5 minutes. We're going to take one more question. And if we couldn't take your question, I'm really sorry, but feel free to email it to us even. We would send you a response, really. Email it to us. I will put our email somewhere at the bottom, and then you can send it to us. We're happy to continue the conversation. But I'll take this question from Ujwal to be the last question we will take. And he said, we have noticed that investors or accelerators like YCOM ask for startups to get incorporated in the US or Delaware due to their trust in the system. What steps can we as startups and Itana as an ecosystem player take to enable that trust in Nigeria or Africa? That's like the $1 billion question he just asked.
Yeah, I mean that's a big important question. My experience, and I was the second ever Y Combinator company from Nigeria, right? Is that it's not a bad idea to have the Delaware company, right? However, where a lot of startups get it wrong and get hurt is in, first of all, in the way they set that up, right? So many people do it on their own, they don't get the right advice, but also in the way that they tie that to their Nigeria operations. Many of them are setting up themselves up for double taxation because your taxation claims in Nigeria are not always you're not always able to net them off against your US taxes. And sometimes if you don't take in investment the proper way in the US, they may misconstrue it as revenue, right? So it's really about for example, and what I would say is that also sending money back out is also very critical. You have to do it properly. It's not easy to get money out of Naira in Nigeria into the US. You understand what I'm saying? And so having an Itana company kind of act as a blocker gives you a number of advantages. So you have your Delaware company, you have an Itana FZE. From that Itana FZE, you can manage all your Pan-African operations. You can pay your employees in dollars legally, because right now a lot of people are doing it from their Nigeria companies, which is illegal actually. You can eliminate a lot of your tax burden. There's so many taxes many people are not paying, and one day when your investors want to come and see your Series A documentation, they will look and they'll see that you have not paid. We always have this problem as a venture fund. They'll say, you have not paid all these taxes. You have not followed all these rules. A number of those rules are relaxed in the zone because you're exporting, right? And then how many of us collect VAT on transactions that we do in Nigeria? Many of us don't collect VAT, and that is against the law, right? So it's really about building a culture of compliance. And then if people see that within the zone, things are safe, right? And people are running very good firms. A number of times, a lot of the challenges that we see come from a lack of compliance, an objective lack of compliance, which startups now term as Nigerian government harassing them. I mean, I'm not in favor of how the Binance issue has been handled, but if we can call a spade, there was a fundamental lack of compliance that underlied the original summons, right? You understand what I'm saying? So you have to be very, very compliant. You can't just say every time that government apprehends you is because government is greedy or corrupt or wrong. Sometimes we are the problem. Now, can it be easier for you to operate within Itana? Yes. And Itana can make sure that you are compliant so that you don't have problems with the Nigerian government. I don't know if that.
And we make it, and just to add to that, I know we're at the end of it. Somebody, a LinkedIn user here, also sort of asked a question very related to what E was speaking about. He was speaking about the tax regulator. How does Nigeria feel if companies are leaving their Nigerian customs area to come into Itana, which is supposed to be tax free? Well, just to clarify that, right, that we have to realize the types of companies that Itana is for. Somebody also asked that question. How early do you come into Itana? So I think that the earlier the better, right? And at the same time, you have to understand that Itana, going back to this thing about Africa to the world, right? That's what Itana might set up for. All right, we're not designed for startups that are isolated and looking to operate in Nigeria, right? This is not a tax avoidance scheme, right? Legally, right, as you provide services outside the shores of Nigeria, right, you are not meant to pay VAT, but as a CAC company, you will pay VAT, right? So there isn't any challenges we have with the tax, man. We're making things easier for people to be compliant, right? And as I see, so when this is not a tax avoidance scheme, there will be tax savings, right, when you come into Itana, but this is actually something that helps all parties, all stakeholders involved, because we're also making it easier for companies that are trying to operate in the Nigerian ecosystem, right, to be easily
Forex. I'm bringing in Forex and help
right,
more exports. The government
and help take out the Forex, right, and help recapture.
Exactly. It's very important to understand the goal. The goal is not, if you want to operate in Nigeria, please by all means incorporate CAC. It's very good for you, right? But if you're looking at becoming an Africa to the world company, then Itana is the place for you to be. So that's
Or
the
even in
system.
Nigeria to Africa, even in Nigeria to Africa, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes, Nigeria too. Exactly.
And I guess just one thing to highlight before we wrap up, like there are so many free zones already. This is not an entirely new concept. The only thing that's new is that this is the first digital free zone, right? And so from a tax perspective, this is something that the Nigerian government are very familiar with.
it's been existing for 30 plus years without any resistance or challenges to it. 100%.
Awesome. I think that was very, very useful and very informative because we do get a lot of these questions, and I don't think the questions are ever going to stop. And we're just going to keep educating people on how it works and the benefits and the concerns. They always ask questions about regulation, is it right for their companies and the rest. So we will share more information about this as we go along because there are some parts that are being shaped as we interact and engage with government, engage with our Itana 100. And by the way, if you would like to get started on the process, you can join our Itana 100. These are going to be the first 100 companies that will be registered in the Itana zone and operate and enjoy the benefits of being a part of the free zone. So go there, and I've put, okay, I can see the link at the bottom, itana.africa/100. Go there and begin the process, and along the way, we would guide you and give you all the answers to the questions that you have. Whatever is not clear, we're happy to have a meeting with you and be able to answer the questions that you have as well. So thank you so much for being a part of this session. It was really engaging. I love the questions. Thank you so much to our wonderful guest, Yvonne, Luqman Eid. Such a pleasure to have you here on this special day. Thank you for joining us today. The Doing Business in Africa series is brought to you by Itana. If you run a tech company or a service-based business and you'd like to join the exclusive group of 100 companies operating in Africa's first free zone for the digital economy, just go to the link that we've just shared to get started. Until next time, thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye bye.